Welcome to Dream Tale Sleep Stories. Tonight's reading is Not My Suitcase. Settle into your bed or sofa and let your shoulders, jaw, and eyelids grow heavy. Inhale slowly, 1, 2, 3, and sigh the air away, allowing the day to fade into quiet dark. With every soft inhale, you invite fresh English phrases. With every gentle exhale, stray thoughts drift farther off. Behind my voice flows a gentle melody, renowned for guiding the mind toward deep relaxation. Keep your eyes closed or follow the captions, whichever feels right. Simply receive the rhythm and resonance of the language. Deep in rest, tonight's phrases will take root like seeds, ready to bloom into stronger English skills with the morning light. When you feel settled, hold that unhurried breath and allow yourself to drift into the tale. Not My Suitcase begins now, and when the story's final line has faded, the music will linger a little longer, carrying you gently deeper into sleep. Not My Suitcase. Scene 1, Gate 14. Daniel Marsh had always believed that airports were the most honest places in the world. Strip away the business class lounges and the duty-free perfume, and what you had was pure, unfiltered human anxiety. People rushing to be somewhere else, or dreading what waited when they arrived. He counted himself firmly in the latter category. He had spent 3 days in Budapest, covering a story about counterfeit pharmaceuticals that had turned out to be, in his editor's words, aggressively uninteresting. The flights had been delayed, the hotel had smelled of mildew, and his laptop had died on the second day, forcing him to take notes in a paper notebook like some kind of Victorian correspondent. Now, he was at Budapest Liszt Ferenc International Airport, standing at baggage carousel number 3, watching an identical parade of black suitcases orbit the belt like tired satellites. His own suitcase was black, medium-sized. He had tied a red ribbon around the handle 2 years ago after a similar mix-up in Madrid, but the ribbon had fallen off somewhere between Singapore and Seoul, and he had never replaced it. He made a mental note, as he always did in this situation, to buy a bright orange case the moment he got home. The belt slowed, the crowd thinned. Daniel spotted a suitcase that looked exactly like his, same brand, same scuff on the left corner, and grabbed it. The weight was wrong, heavier than he remembered packing, but luggage always felt heavier at the end of a trip. He wheeled it through customs, nodded at the officer who waved him through, and stepped out into the gray October afternoon. In the taxi, he rested his hand on top of the case and thought about nothing in particular. The driver had the radio on, some Hungarian pop song with too much synthesizer. Rain began to streak the window. Daniel watched the city dissolve into motorway, and then the motorway dissolve into the flat gray outskirts, and then closed his eyes and let the motion carry him toward the hotel, where he would sleep for 10 hours before catching his morning flight back to London. He did not open the suitcase until he was in his room. He did not sleep that night at all. Scene 2. What was inside? The zipper gave a sound like a long exhale. Daniel lifted the lid and stood very still for a moment, the way you might stand when you realize the thing you are looking at cannot be what you think it is. The top layer was clothing, a white shirt, folded with surgical precision, a dark jacket, a pair of gray trousers, normal enough. But beneath the clothing, wrapped in a layer of brown paper and secured with rubber bands, were bundles of cash. Euros mostly, but also some American dollars and what looked like Swiss francs. He counted 6 bundles without unwrapping any of them, and his best estimate, trying to stay calm. was somewhere between 40 and 80,000 euros. He stepped back, sat on the edge of the bed, looked at the suitcase, looked at the door, looked at the suitcase again. Beneath the money, nestled in the side pocket, was a small notebook. Black cover, no label. He opened it carefully, the way you might open something that could detonate. The pages were dense with handwriting, a narrow, precise script that alternated between English and what he recognized after a moment as German. Numbers appeared in columns, names appeared in margins, some were crossed out, others were underlined twice. He recognized none of them, except one, near the bottom of the third page, Harlow. He knew that name. Everybody in financial journalism knew that name. Philip Harlow had run one of the most respected private equity firms in Europe for 20 years before disappearing from public life 3 years ago. There had been rumors. There were always rumors about where the money had actually gone. The investigations had stalled. The regulators had found nothing conclusive. Harlow had retired to somewhere sunny and uncommunicative, and the story had been quietly buried. The notebook suggested the story was not buried at all. The last item in the suitcase was an airline ticket, a physical ticket printed on cardstock, which nobody used anymore. Budapest to Lisbon, departing tomorrow morning, one way. The name on the ticket was Leon Chen. Daniel set the ticket down on the bedside table and looked at it for a long time. Then he took out his phone and found the number for the airport's lost luggage office. He stared at it. He thought about the cash, the notebook, the name Harlow written in the margin like a footnote to something catastrophic. He put his phone face down on the mattress and did not call. Outside, the rain had become serious. It hammered the window in long, lateral gusts. Somewhere in the corridor, a door slammed. Daniel sat in his room with 80,000 euros and a dead man's notebook, and listened to the storm and tried to think clearly. He was still trying when his phone rang. Scene 3, the call. The number was unknown. He let it ring twice, 3 times, and then answered. Mr. Marsh, not a question. The voice was male, unhurried, with an accent he couldn't place, Eastern European perhaps, or possibly just a man who had lived in too many countries to have a fixed origin. You have something that doesn't belong to you. Daniel said nothing. The silence lasted long enough to be its own kind of statement. The suitcase, the voice continued, pleasantly. The black one, medium-sized. You took it from Carousel 3 at 16:42 this afternoon. I watched you do it. He kept walking, rounded the corner, and ducked into the first open door he found, which turned out to be a small pharmacy, fluorescently lit and nearly empty. He stood between the cold medicine and the vitamins and watched the street through the window. Gray suit did not appear. He waited 2 minutes. Then he left through the pharmacy's back entrance. A gamble, since he hadn't known there was one, but the layout of these old buildings was predictable enough, and came out into a narrow lane that ran parallel to the main street. He walked quickly, not running, because running attracted attention. The suitcase wheels clattered over the cobblestones. He took 3 turns at random, and then stopped in front of a small cafe that was still open. Its windows steamed with warmth, and went inside. It was there that he first saw Mrs. Chen. She was sitting alone at a corner table, drinking tea, and she looked up at him as he came through the door with the expression of someone who had been expecting him for quite some time. She was perhaps 70, small and precise in her movements, wearing a dark coat and a single strand of pearls. Her hair was white and neatly arranged. On the table beside her teacup was a photograph. "Mr. Marsh," she said, "please sit down. We have very little time, and there is a great deal I need to tell you." He sat, because the alternative was standing in the doorway looking afraid, and because something in her manner made panic feel like the wrong response. "How do you know my name?" he said. "I have known your name for 3 days," she said. "I have been watching you since you arrived in Budapest. Not the way they have been watching you. I want to be clear about that. I am not with them." She pushed the photograph across the table. "This is my son." It was a professional photograph, the kind universities use for faculty pages. The man in it was perhaps 40, with his mother's precise features and an expression of cautious intelligence. Daniel had seen the photo before, 6 minutes ago, on a cached website. "Leon Chen," he said. She nodded. "He has been missing for 6 months. I know where he is. I also know why. And the answer is in that suitcase you are pulling behind you. That notebook is the only thing that can help him." She folded her hands on the table with enormous composure. "I need you to trust me, Mr. Marsh, which I understand is an extraordinary thing to ask of a stranger. But the man who called you tonight will not simply take the suitcase and let you go. That is not how Philip Harlow operates." Outside, through the steamed window, a gray shape moved past. Daniel watched it without turning his head. "Tell me everything," he said. Scene 5, the notebook. They moved to a room above the cafe, which Mrs. Chen had apparently arranged in advance, the way someone arranges things when they have been planning for a very long time. It was small and clean, with 2 chairs and a table and a window that overlooks the lane below. She poured tea from a thermos she produced from her bag, and Daniel sat across from her with the notebook open between them. "My son was a cryptographer," she said. "He specialized in the kind of encryption used by financial systems, the architecture that underlies wire transfers, holdings, shell company structures. 3 years ago, he was approached by a consultancy firm. Very prestigious, very discreet. The work, he was told, involved designing security systems for private clients. Harlow, Daniel said. Harlow's network." She touched the corner of the notebook with one finger, as if verifying it was real. "Philip Harlow is not the name of a person, Mr. Marsh. It is the name of a system, a method. There are perhaps 12 individuals at the center of it, and dozens more who operate around the edges without knowing the full picture. Over the past 20 years, they have moved approximately 400 million euros through a network of legitimate businesses, charitable foundations, and academic institutions. Not stolen exactly, redirected. Tax structures, investment vehicles, money that was supposed to reach hospitals, research programs, pension funds, quietly rerouted. And Leon discovered this. Leon built part of the architecture without understanding what it was for. When he realized, he began to document it. The notebook is his record. 6 months of work, coded in a system only he fully understands, but decipherable by someone with the right background. It contains names, account numbers, transaction chains, proof. She looked at him steadily. He was supposed to get himself and that notebook to Lisbon, where a journalist contact was waiting. Instead, he disappeared. Someone intercepted him before he could reach the airport. Daniel looked at the pages of the notebook, the columns of numbers, the names in the margins. He saw now that some of the crossed-out entries were dates, meetings perhaps, or transactions that had already occurred. The 2 underlined names appeared several times, always together, Harlow and one other, which he had taken to be a code but now suspected was a real surname, Maris. "Do you know where he is?" Daniel said. "Your son?" "I believe he is being held at a property outside the city, a private estate. They will not harm him as long as they believe he might lead them to the notebook. But that calculation will change." She met his eyes. Someone left that suitcase at the airport for a reason, Mr. Marsh. Someone inside Harlow's network is trying to get this information out. I do not know who, but they chose an airport, chose a carousel, chose the moment you would be there. They chose me specifically? You wrote about pharmaceutical fraud last year, and the Meridian Bank collapse the year before. You have a reputation for following stories that others prefer to leave alone. She paused. I do not think it was entirely an accident that you picked up that bag. Daniel closed the notebook slowly. Below the window, the lane was quiet. No gray shapes moved in the darkness. He thought about the ticket to Lisbon, the name of the journalist contact that Mrs. Chen had not mentioned, and whether there was any version of this situation in which he walked away clean. He already knew the answer. You did not stumble into something like this and walk away clean. You either walked away at all, or you saw it through to the end. He looked at the notebook. Then he looked at Mrs. Chen. All right, he said. What do we do next? Scene 6. Vera. She arrived at 2 a.m, knocking twice on the door, in a pattern Mrs. Chen had apparently been expecting, because she crossed to the door without hesitation and opened it without looking through the peephole. The woman who stepped inside was perhaps 35, with the kind of stillness that Daniel associated with people who had spent a great deal of time in dangerous places. She was not remarkable looking, medium height, dark hair pulled back, wearing a jacket that was practical rather than fashionable. But there was something about the way she occupied space that made the room feel smaller. Vera Solis, she said to Daniel, not offering a hand. I was Leon's contact in Lisbon. When he didn't arrive, I came to find him. Former intelligence, Daniel said. She gave him a look that wasn't quite a smile. Former enough. I've been watching Harlow's network for 2 years independently. Leon found me through a mutual contact. The plan was for him to bring the notebook to Lisbon, and we would take it together to a journalist at El País who has been building a parallel investigation. She paused. But now the notebook is here, which is useful, and Leon is not, which is not. Can you get him out? Mrs. Chen said. I know the property. I've had eyes on it for 4 days. Vera set a tablet on the table and pulled up what looked like satellite imagery. A large rural estate, several outbuildings, a gate at the end of a long drive. There are 6 people on site at any given time, rotating in pairs. Leon is being held in the main building, 2nd floor, east wing. He is not restrained, but the windows are secured. She zoomed in. The difficulty is timing. We need a distraction significant enough to draw at least 4 of the 6 away from the building. The suitcase, Daniel said. The money. Both women looked at him. They want it back badly enough to threaten me 20 minutes after I picked it up. If I contact them, say I'll make the handover, and then we use the time they're focused on the exchange to go in the other way. You would be the distraction, Vera said. I would be the distraction, Daniel agreed. Vera looked at him for a moment with an expression that was professionally neutral, but not, he thought, entirely dismissive. That is either very brave or very foolish. In my experience, those are the same thing at different speeds, he said. She almost smiled this time. There is one more thing you should know, she said. The man on the phone tonight, the one who told you to come to the bar, we believe he is not one of Harlow's core people. We believe he is the same person who left the suitcase for you to find. She looked at the notebook. There is someone inside the network who wants it destroyed. Not used, not published, destroyed, along with anyone who has seen it. Which means, Mr. Marsh, that you are not simply bait. You are a liability. The room was quiet for a moment. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The silence that followed it felt absolute. Then we should move quickly, Mrs. Chen said. as though this were the most reasonable conclusion in the world, and poured everyone more tea. Scene 7. The betrayal. They made their plan in careful, whispered detail over the next hour. Daniel would call the number back in the morning and arrange a new exchange, not the bar, somewhere more open, somewhere where Gray Suit could not simply walk him into a waiting car. Vera would approach the estate from the south, while the handover occupied their attention. Mrs. Chen would wait 2 streets from the estate, with a car and 2 phones. It had the tidiness of a plan made in the middle of the night, which meant it was almost certainly incomplete. But it was what they had. Daniel slept for 3 hours in the chair. When he woke, pale light was coming through the window, and Vera was watching the lane below with the fixed attention of someone who had learned to sleep in very short intervals a long time ago. He called the number at 7. The voice answered on the first ring. "There's been a change of plan," Daniel said. "Not the bar. The chain bridge. South End, 10 o'clock. I'll have the suitcase." A pause. "You are in no position to renegotiate, Mr. Marsh. And yet here I am, negotiating. The bridge or nothing. I walk out in the open where your friends can see me, and you walk out in the open where anyone passing can see you, and we make the exchange like adults." He kept his voice level. "Unless you would prefer that I take the next flight to London and give this to my editor." Another pause, longer this time. "The bridge, 10 o'clock. The line went dead. Vera was already moving, pulling on her jacket. "I'll be at the estate by 9. Call me when you're at the bridge." She looked at him with that same composed, analytical expression. "Be careful, Mr. Marsh. The person who left you the suitcase will not want you to make that handover. They will try to stop you before you reach the bridge." She left. Daniel and Mrs. Chen descended to the street an hour later and separated, she to her car, he to the river. He was halfway across the Erzsébet Bridge when the second call came, not the unknown number, a different one which his phone identified as a Budapest landline. He answered. "Daniel." It was Vera's voice, but she was speaking quickly, quietly, with an urgency that was entirely different from her manner of the previous hours. "Don't go to the chain bridge. Turn back now." "What's happened?" "I am at the estate. Leon is not here, Daniel. He was never here. The satellite image, I should have verified it more recently. It was 4 days old. The building is empty." A sound in the background, a door, or something heavier. "I walked into a trap. They knew I was coming. They know about the plan." Her voice dropped further. "I am not who I told you I was. I need you to understand that. I came here for the notebook, not for Leon. There is no journalist in Lisbon. There never was." Daniel had stopped walking. He was standing on the bridge in the morning light, with the suitcase at his feet and the river moving slowly beneath him. "Then who are you?" he said. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is that the man you're about to meet at the chain bridge is not going to take the suitcase and let you go. He is going to take the suitcase and..." The call cut out. Dead silence. Daniel looked at the suitcase. He looked at the chain bridge, 200 meters away. He thought about Mrs. Chen, waiting in a car she had said was 2 streets from an estate that was apparently empty. He thought about how neatly everything had been arranged, and how neatly he had fitted into it. He picked up the suitcase, he turned around, he walked back the way he had come, and then he walked faster, and then he ran. Scene 8. Mrs. Chen. He found her exactly where she had said she would be, 2 streets east of the address she had given him, sitting in a small dark car, with the engine off. She did not seem surprised to see him arrive at a run. She simply leaned across and opened the passenger door. He got in, breathing hard, and told her about Vera's call. Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting. When he had finished, she was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said. He looked at her. "You know. I suspected Vera was not who she claimed to be from the beginning. The way she knew the property layout, the detail about the satellite imagery. Intelligence agencies update that data continuously. The image being 4 days old was not an oversight, it was a fabrication." She looked at her hands, which were folded precisely in her lap. "I allowed it, because I needed her to believe the plan was proceeding as she expected. I needed her at that estate, away from you." Daniel said nothing. The city moved around them, ordinary and indifferent. "My son is not missing," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "Or rather, he was. He is not anymore. He has been in Lisbon for 3 weeks. He made it out. He made it out 6 months ago, not by plane, by road, with help from a former student of mine who works in diplomatic services. The operation to retrieve the notebook was his idea, not mine. He could not go back for it himself. He needed someone else to carry it out. Someone with no known connection to him. Someone that Harlow's people would not immediately identify as a threat." She turned to look at him. "Someone who picks up the wrong suitcase at an airport, and instead of simply returning it, reads the notebook and searches the missing man's name." The silence that followed was comprehensive. "You staged it," Daniel said. "The suitcase, the phone call, all of it." "Not the phone call. That was genuine. They had indeed been watching you from the moment you picked it up. We gambled that they would approach you, which would give you reason to believe the danger was real, which it was." She paused. "Vera was also real. She works for a private firm that Harlow uses for internal security. We knew she would appear once the notebook was in play. She was the variable we could not fully control." Daniel thought about the morning's events with a new, reorganized clarity. The phone call from Vera, designed to panic him, to get him to run, perhaps to run somewhere specific. The estate, conveniently empty, and now Vera, caught somewhere she had not expected to be caught. "The person who left me the suitcase," he said. "The man on the phone, the one you said might be an insider. That was also you." "That was my son," she said. "Calling from Lisbon. He did not threaten you, Mr. Marsh. He gave you information. He told you exactly when and where the suitcase was taken, because he needed you to know it was real." Outside, a tram passed with a sound like metal dissolving. Daniel looked at the suitcase in the back seat. Then he looked at Mrs. Chen, this small, perfectly composed woman who had moved him across Budapest like a piece on a board, and had done it, as far as he could tell, because there was no other way to get what needed to be gotten. "The journalist in Lisbon," he said. "There is one. There is, a very good one. She has been waiting for that notebook for 8 months." Mrs. Chen looked at him steadily. "You could take it to her yourself if you chose to. Your name on the byline, the story of the decade, Mr. Marsh. I cannot think of anyone better positioned to tell it." He looked at her for a long time. The morning light came through the windscreen and made everything look very ordinary. "Drive," he said. Scene 9, Lisbon. The journalist's name was Caterina Flores, and she met them at a cafe near the waterfront, with Leon Chen sitting beside her, looking thinner than his faculty photograph, but otherwise intact. He and his mother held each other briefly, with a formality that Daniel recognized as the particular restraint of people who have learned that emotion is most safely expressed in private. Then Leon sat across from Daniel and put both hands flat on the table and said simply, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Daniel said. "Tell me what's in the notebook." So they told him. All of it. in the kind of precise, sequential detail that Katerina had been assembling piece by piece for 8 months, and which the notebook now completed. The Harlow network had, over 20 years, siphoned funds from 17 institutional investors across 8 countries. The money had passed through 43 shell entities, 3 legitimate foundations, and a research institute at a German university whose senior leadership had either been complicit or conveniently uninformed. The total, as best as anyone could now calculate, was just over 430 million euros. The notebook provided the architecture. Katerina had the institutional records. Together, they had something that no regulatory body, no law firm, and no private investigation had managed to assemble. A complete picture in a single, coherent chain of evidence. They worked for 6 days in Katerina's apartment. Daniel wrote the English version. Katerina translated and edited alongside him, adding the European financial context that his journalism had never required him to know. Leon annotated the technical sections. Mrs. Chen made coffee and occasionally corrected their Portuguese. On the 7th day, the story was submitted simultaneously to 3 publications. Katerina's outlet in Lisbon, a financial newspaper in Frankfurt, and, with his editor Claire's somewhat thunderstruck approval, Daniel's own magazine in London. The response was not immediate. These things never were. But, within 48 hours, 2 of the 12 names at the center of the network had issued statements through lawyers. Within a week, a regulatory body in Brussels had opened a formal inquiry. Within a month, the first arrests had been made in Vienna. Vera Solis was not among them. She had disappeared from the estate outside Budapest without trace, which Daniel found simultaneously alarming and, in some way he couldn't entirely articulate, not surprising. Gray suit was never identified. Daniel flew back to London on a Tuesday, carrying only his own suitcase this time. A new one, bright orange, with his initials on a tag. At the airport, he stood at the baggage carousel and watched the cases orbit until his appeared, entirely unmistakable, and lifted it from the belt with a feeling he couldn't quite name. Relief, perhaps, or the particular satisfaction of knowing for once exactly what was inside. On the flight, he opened his laptop and began writing. Not the article. That was done, filed, out in the world doing whatever it was going to do. He wrote something else. The beginning of an account of the past week, starting with Carousel 3 at Budapest Airport and a suitcase that was the wrong weight, and yet somehow exactly right. He did not know yet what to call it. He thought for a while about the red ribbon he had once tied to his case and lost somewhere between cities, and how long he had meant to replace it and never had. He thought about a small woman in a dark coat, pouring tea with absolute composure at 2 in the morning, moving people quietly and precisely toward the outcome she had already decided upon. He thought about what Vera had said in the moment before she was herself revealed. I am not who I told you I was. None of them had been, entirely. Not Vera, not Mrs. Chen, not Leon, and, he considered this honestly, not Daniel himself, who had told himself he was simply returning a lost suitcase, all the way up until the moment he chose not to. The plane descended toward London. The city spread out below him in the afternoon light, gray and specific and entirely familiar, as if nothing had changed, as if he had simply been away for a few days on an aggressively uninteresting story and was now returning to his ordinary life. He saved the document. He closed the laptop. He looked out of the window at the approaching city and let the story settle into the past where it belonged, at least until he decided what to do with it. The wheels touched down.